Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker and today's video is another episode and the final episode of 2019 of NBA Trade Machine, and this one focuses on the Sacramento Kings as an entire team. Now I've only done this one other time in terms of an entire team being in a Trade Machine video, and that was with the Detroit Pistons. And the reason that I'm doing this with the Kings is because I think there's a lot of different possibilities on this team, so I didn't want to just narrow it down to one player. We've done a Bogdan Bogdanovic Trade Machine video in the past earlier this year, but this way it's kind of opened up to everybody on the roster, because this is a Kings team that's certainly been having some issues. They were one of the bigger disappointments in the beginning of the season, and then they started to pick it up, and now they're having even more issues, and it seems like guys like Dwayne Dedmon, veterans on the roster, would like to go elsewhere. So there's a lot of trade possibilities here, so let's go ahead and get into some of the community suggested ones that you guys sent me, as well as some of my own. First up, Jack says that the Kings would receive DJ Augustin, Mo Bamba, and 2 second-round picks in exchange for Bogdan Bogdanovic. Let's talk about this for the Kings first. Bogdanovich is a player that is definitely on the trade block because they don't have a ton of money in the future to spend on his extension, as I've talked about in a previous video, and he is a restricted free agent this offseason and is going to be a pretty valuable free agent. So if they wanted to get some value out of him, if they know they're not going to be able to re-sign him in the offseason, then that would make a lot of sense. And in this scenario, they're getting Mo Bamba, who could be a really good player at the 5 spot moving forward, then a point guard DJ Augustin that I'm assuming is just there to make the money work because he doesn't really fit too much in the rotation because they already have a couple of good guards. He could definitely play for them, but it's not like a game changer for them or anything. And then 2 second-round picks as well. And so there's not really any salary cap relief involved here because Bogdanovich is a restricted free agent regardless. But basically what this boils down to is you're getting rid of a player that you know probably isn't going to be on your roster next year in Bogdanovich in exchange for someone in Bamba that could be really good down the road and is at least under contract, and then 2 second-round picks, which I'm not putting too much stock in. On the other hand, for the Magic, this is, for me, a little bit early to be giving up on Mo Bamba in a situation like this. I love Bogdanovich, but also DJ Augustin is really important for this team as a point guard, so I don't know how quickly I would give up on him. I know the Markelle Fultz has been playing well, but I still think that he's a pretty critical part of their team. But I do think that there need to be some changes in Orlando, and maybe this is it. Maybe a little bit more perimeter scoring, a little bit more perimeter playmaking. They have a good amount of depth in the front court where they don't necessarily need Bamba. I still think he has a good amount of potential moving forward, and I wouldn't call him a bust quite yet, and I feel like this is a little bit early to give up on him, but if that's something that they wanted to do, then this could make sense for both sides, depending on the situation. Next up, a trade that I came up with in which the Sixers get Nemanja Bjelica in exchange for Zaire Smith, Trey Burke, and a second-round pick. Okay, so this one is interesting because initially, I think it was 2 years ago at this point, Bjelica was supposed to sign with Philadelphia. He signed like a big one-year deal and then ended up turning around and saying, "No, just kidding, I'm going to go and play overseas." And then he was like, "Okay, actually, I'm going to go sign with the Kings." It was a really weird situation, but now he would end up actually in Philadelphia. So let's start off with this for the Sixers. It's pretty obvious. This team needs shooting, even though they shot the ball extremely well on Christmas Day, which we talked about in my Christmas Day review video. In general, they definitely still need some more shooting on this roster to complement some of the other pieces. And that is the one thing that this team really needs above all else, is guys that can knock down perimeter shots. Bjelica is a really good shooter. I know I'm mispronouncing his name. I mispronounce it every time, but he's a really good perimeter shooter, and they're not giving up a ton here in terms of their current rotation. Zaire Smith could be a good piece down the road, not helping them too much right now. Trey Burke, salary filler, and then the second-round pick as a little bit extra incentive. For the Kings, it's a very similar story to the first one where you're getting back some future value. Bjelica is under contract for another season, but with the way their year's going right now, they should probably focus on getting some younger players back for him anyway. This is pretty good value. Again, I think that Smith could eventually be a really good player once he gets healthy. Could be another Markelle Fultz thing where, he just needs to get out of that situation in Philadelphia and get to just a new place and kind of reset. I think this would be a good deal. I think this would be an excellent deal for Philly to get that shooting. And then for the Kings, they're getting some value out of a player as well that isn't necessarily in their long-term plans. Next up, James says that Portland would get Harrison Barnes and Yogi Ferrell in exchange for Kent Bazemore, Anthony Simons, Anthony Tolliver, and a 2020 lottery-protected first. He says Portland gets a starting caliber 3 in Barnes and a decent backup point guard to replace Simons. Sacramento gets a nice young piece, an expiring, and a first. All right, so first let's talk about this for the Kings, because there's actually a lot of different levels to this trade. So first they're getting Kent Bazemore, which is essentially salary relief for Harrison Barnes, who, even though they just signed him to the deal that he's currently on, you could view it as getting out from under long-term money. Even though they were just willing to do that last offseason, he is on a pretty significant salary over the next couple years. They get out from under that immediately with Bazemore. Maybe this allows them to sign Bogdanovich or re-sign Bogdanovich in the offseason if they wanted to. Then you're getting Anthony Simons, who is a good young guard that I think is going to be really good down the road, and I would imagine Portland would hesitate to trade, so that's kind of the first part of this trade that I'm questioning. Is I don't really think that Portland's going to trade away Anthony Simons this year, because I think he's a really critical future piece for them. But in this scenario for the Kings, really good piece to get back. Tolliver, essentially salary filler, and then the lottery protected first in exchange for basically Harrison Barnes. I mean, Yogi Ferrell is also there, but it's basically just Harrison Barnes that you're giving up. This is a lot of value, to be honest, for Harrison Barnes. When you're getting the salary relief and you're getting, again, a player in Simons that I think is going to be really good, and you're getting the first as well. And I can understand why Portland would want to do this, because they definitely need help on the wings, and Barnes is actually exactly what they need in terms of like a combo 3-4 that can defend and that can shoot. That's exactly what they need. I just don't know that they're going to want to cash in on Simons and a lottery protected first to get someone like Harrison Barnes for the next 4 years. Like, it definitely makes sense from a personnel standpoint, but from everything that I've read, they really value Anthony Simons, whether it's as a future trade piece or just as a really good player down the road. So I'm questioning that part of this, James, but other than that, I can definitely see where you're going here, and this would make sense for both sides, depending on your evaluation, as always, of a couple of different players in the deal. Second to last now is a trade that I came up with, in which Dwayne Dedmon goes to Boston in exchange for Daniel Tice, Romeo Langford, and Semi Ojeleye. Okay, so this is another one of those deals where I'm trying to get Boston a starting caliber 5 without giving up Marcus Smart, because every time you look at the roster and you try and come up with a trade for anybody that's making any kind of real money around the league, Marcus Smart kind of has to be the guy, right? If you're just trading one player just in terms of all their other salaries. And I know that they really, really do not want to trade him, and I highly doubt that they would consider trading him in most circumstances. So here, Tice is, again, he's there for salary. Unfortunately, they would have to trade him in this scenario, or Enes Kanter, just to make the salaries work. Then Ojeleye as well in a similar kind of role. And then Romeo Langford, who a lot of people got mad at me for putting in a trade last week or the week before for Boston. But in this kind of situation, like, Dwayne Dedmon is wildly more helpful to this Boston team than Romeo Langford is this year. And I understand you can talk about the future stuff if you want, but this team already has so many good future pieces that I think giving up one for a player like Dedmon that is exactly what they need at the 5 spot really wouldn't be the end of the world. And for the Kings, Dedmon doesn't want to be there anymore anyway. He signed for the next couple of seasons. You're getting back salary filler, and then Romeo Langford, who could be, pretty good down the road. I think this makes a lot of sense for both sides. Again, Boston needs a 5 that can contend a little bit better in the paint. Tice, again, has been good for them, but Dedmon is definitely a better player, can shoot outside, can protect the rim, good defender, does all the things that Boston's going to want him to do, and would honestly be a perfect fit for them. And again, doesn't want to be in Sacramento anymore, and they're not really giving up all that much in terms of their team this year. So I think this is a really good deal for both sides. And last up now, Explosion Cake says that the Pacers would receive Dwayne Dedmon and Bogdan Bogdanovic in exchange for Miles Turner. And he also says that Sacramento can throw in a first or second, depending on how you value Miles Turner. This is actually really interesting, and when I saw it, I didn't anticipate liking it as much as I did. And I would imagine actually that a lot of people aren't going to like this, because it seems like every time I try and put Miles Turner in a trade machine, people get upset, or at least Pacers fans get upset. I'm here to tell you, like, the Sabonis Turner thing is just, it's not going to fit long term. Like, one of those guys is going to get moved on their current contract, and Sabonis is such a good offensive player that it's probably going to end up being Turner. Those two guys just don't fit together. And this isn't the worst deal to be getting back for him, because they have the money and the space to bring back Bogdanovich in the offseason and add another really nice piece to their group. Then you've got Dwayne Dedmon to provide shooting alongside Sabonis and, fill the hole in the front court that Turner leaving would provide. And again, you've got so much more perimeter playmaking with Bogdanovich, and just add to what is a really good perimeter group in Indiana. And then Sabonis can just be your full-time 5. And I think that this is actually really, really interesting. And you can talk about the picks and stuff like this guy said, in terms of how you value Miles Turner if you want to, and there's always going to be a range on those kind of things, and people are always going to disagree. But for me, this is a really cool trade. I like it a lot. It's kind of outside of the box. I definitely wouldn't have thought about it myself, but the Kings are getting a player in Miles Turner that ideally moving forward can fit pretty well with their team. There obviously could be issues with whether or not he fits with Marvin Bagley, but whether or not he is a full-time 5 or not is kind of up in the air. So they kind of, put themselves in that bind themselves by picking a player that doesn't necessarily fit into a position in a bad way. But still, I mean, Miles Turner is good value for these two players. I mean, Dedmon doesn't want to be there. Bogdanovich, you're probably not going to be able to re-sign anyway. Miles Turner is a really, really good player, signed long-term. And even if the Bagley-Turner fit doesn't work long-term, you can end up, moving him or moving Bagley or whatever you need to do. At least you have the value of, only trading away these two players to get a better player. Miles Turner is the best player in this deal, in my opinion. So all around, I think this is a really cool and interesting trade that I wanted to save for last because it's just one that I never really would have thought of, but was really, really good, and I appreciate it. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video. I apologize if I sound a little bit sick. I am a little bit under the weather, but like I said, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. And yeah, thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.